HOA Karen exploded when I refused her demands, then the entire neighborhood voted her out. Have you ever had someone threaten to ruin your entire life over a bush? I mean literally a bush. That's what started this war. Not drugs, not noise complaints, not even a dog bite. A bush. Specifically, the small, drought-resistant flowering sage I planted on the corner of my yard legally. I might add right at the edge of the property line. That's all it took for Karen Delaney, president of the Oak Hills Homeowners Association, to go thermonuclear. See, I moved into Oak Hills 2 months after my wife passed away. Cancer. Stage 4. It tore through her so fast, I barely had time to say goodbye. After 20 years of marriage, I needed peace, quiet, healing, and gardening helped. I'd spend my mornings kneeling in the dirt with soil under my fingernails and grief in my chest. That bush wasn't just a plant, it was something she picked out on one of our last trips to the nursery. Karen didn't care. She showed up at my door, heels clicking like a metronome of menace, waving a laminated HOA ordinance I'd never seen before. "This plant violates community color standards," she barked. "You'll need to remove it immediately or face escalating fines." I looked at her. I looked at the bush. Purple flowers swaying in the breeze like they were mocking the absurdity of the moment. "It's a memorial," I said. "My wife loved this plant." Karen squinted, unfazed. "Then maybe plant it inside your house. HOA regulations exist for a reason." I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I just said no. And that's when the real chaos began. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store to find my garden ripped open like a battlefield. The bush was gone, uprooted, stolen. My irrigation line had been slashed. A handwritten courtesy of Oak Hills HOA note was stuck to my door like some twisted calling card. I staggered back into the house, heart racing, and called my neighbor Grace, a retired nurse who'd helped care for my wife in her last weeks. She came over with her iPad already in hand. "I caught it all on my porch cam," she said, tight-lipped. She tapped the screen. There was Karen, gloves on, clipping, digging, tossing the bush into a black trash bag like it was a bag of leaves. Alone. No workers. No warning. Just her, committing vandalism at 10:45 a.m. while whistling a tune. I stared at the screen, stunned. She actually did it. Grace narrowed her eyes. She's been pushing everyone around for years. But this time, she messed with the wrong man. We didn't go to the police, not yet. Grace had a better idea. That night, she posted the footage on the neighborhood app. No commentary, no context, just the raw, time-stamped video, titled, "HOA President Removes Private Memorial Without Consent." By morning, it had over 700 views and 80 comments. Some of them were horrifying. Turns out I wasn't the only one. Karen had fined a veteran for flying the flag half an inch too low. She'd threatened a single mom for painting her mailbox too cheerful. She'd even yelled at a teenager with Down syndrome for walking too loudly on the sidewalk. And then came the twist. One of the comments came from a guy named Paul Ramirez, a quiet contractor who lived on the cul-de-sac. He posted a blurry screenshot from his security cam dated 3 weeks prior. In it, Karen could be seen unloading large bags of cement into a section of the neighborhood trail that had just been mysteriously closed for maintenance. "Why does the HOA president need 400 pounds of cement?" he asked. That changed everything. People started digging. Turns out Karen had used HOA funds to renovate the trail, but she'd hired her nephew's company, which didn't exist legally, and pocketed the funds. Suddenly, my stolen bush was just the tip of a massive corruption iceberg. The following weekend, a group of neighbors called an emergency HOA meeting. I showed up to the clubhouse wearing my late wife's scarf like a shield. Grace came with her iPad. Paul had copies of Karen's invoices. Over 100 residents packed into that room. Karen strutted in, clipboard in hand, and tried to take control of the meeting. But this time, no one let her. I played the video. Paul passed out the documents. A silence settled in, the kind that hangs just before thunder cracks. Karen's face, I'll never forget it. Lips twitching, eyes wide. For a second, I think she truly believed she could gaslight us all. "This is a smear campaign," she said. "You people have no idea how hard I've worked. Save it." Someone snapped from the back. A motion to remove her as HOA president was proposed on the spot. And the vote? 1,322. Even her own husband voted to oust her. Her clipboard hit the floor like a gavel of defeat. She stormed out red-faced, hissing, "You'll regret this." But the door had already closed behind her. I walked home under the stars that night, slower than usual, but lighter. That spot where the sage bush used to be, Grace helped me replant it the next day. This time, we added a small wooden sign right next to it. By Monday, word had spread beyond Oak Hills. The video clip of Karen digging up my wife's memorial bush had been picked up by a local journalist, one of those suburban watchdog types who live for HOA scandals. The headline practically wrote itself: HOA president accused of vandalizing widow's garden, faces allegations of fund misuse. The reporter called me that afternoon. I wasn't sure I wanted to speak. I'm not the type to chase attention. But something about the way she asked, not with curiosity, but respect, made me say yes. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "you don't have to tell me everything, but people are tired of being bullied by folks hiding behind clipboards and fine print. This story's bigger than just a bush." She was right, so I gave her my truth. I told her about my wife, about the last flower she picked out before hospice. I told her about Grace's porch cam and Karen's tantrum at the HOA meeting. And I told her how it felt to watch a woman rip grief out of the soil like it was weeds. The next morning, the piece ran online and hit local news by noon. That night, Karen's photo aired on the 6 o'clock broadcast, frozen mid-snarl, holding a spade like a trophy of entitlement. Underneath it, in bold letters, "Oak Hills residents oust president after memorial garden destruction." She didn't show her face for a week. But things weren't done unraveling. 2 days after the article aired, Paul Ramirez showed up at my door with a man in a tan jacket. "This is Inspector Green," Paul said. "He's with the county auditor's office." Turns out the HOA wasn't just mismanaged, it was a full-blown paper trail disaster. Karen had been using discretionary funds meant for sidewalk repair, pest control, and snow removal on a suspicious number of vague beautification projects. The kicker? None of them had paperwork. No permits. No competitive bidding. Nothing but hand-signed invoices and big withdrawals written out to D. Delaney Construction, her nephew's fake company. "Mr. Bennett," Inspector Green said, flipping through copies of the records Paul had compiled, "you might have just kicked off a criminal fraud investigation. This isn't just unethical. It's illegal." I just nodded. All I did was refuse to dig up a plant. He half smiled. Sometimes all it takes is one act of dignity. While the county investigated, the new interim HOA board, composed mostly of folks Karen had silenced over the years, decided to hold a public forum. A kind of town hall confessional, where residents could share what they'd been through under Karen's leadership. It was supposed to last an hour. It went on for 4. One by one, neighbors stepped forward. People I'd seen walking dogs, pushing strollers, watering lawns. People I barely knew by name. And every one of them had a story. The elderly veteran who was fined $150 for putting out a flag on Veterans Day without board clearance. The high school senior whose college banner was ripped down from her porch because it clashed with community tones. The gay couple who were forced to repaint their front door after Karen declared the color too flamboyant. It was a slow exhale of years' worth of tension, like this whole neighborhood had been holding its breath under Karen's rule, and finally got to breathe. Then, near the end, someone unexpected took the mic. A boy, maybe 16, nervous, hoodie half-zipped. He stood at the edge of the crowd and said, "I just wanted to say something about the trail." Everyone turned. "My uncle used to walk there every day, until Karen poured cement over it. He had a cane. You know, that trail was the only flat path he could manage." She said it was for safety, but never explained what she meant. She just blocked it off. He hasn't walked outside since. The room was dead silent. And then someone started clapping. Not for the kid, but in anger. Slow, bitter applause. A kind of protest. Grace stood and walked to the front. "I've lived here for 22 years," she said, voice shaking. "And I've never seen this neighborhood act like a community. Not until now. That tells you everything about what Karen took from us." That was the moment everything shifted. What started as a revenge story became something bigger. We weren't just fixing broken irrigation pipes or misused funds. We were reclaiming dignity. But Karen wasn't done fighting. 3 days later, we got hit with a lawsuit. Karen, or rather, her lawyer claimed the vote to remove her was procedurally invalid, that the HOA meeting violated quorum rules, and that the video footage of her was an illegal invasion of privacy. She wanted reinstatement, $20,000 in damages. And I kid you not, a formal apology for defamation of character. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so disgusting. Grace passed the legal documents around at her kitchen table, eyes narrowed. She's not just trying to win. She's trying to rewrite reality. Paul shook his head. She doesn't want her power back. She wants to erase her loss. We pooled together. Grace had a son who worked in civil law. Paul's sister was an accountant. I had a cousin who once clerked for a local judge. Bit by bit, we built a case not just to defend ourselves, but to countersue for damages. That's when we discovered the final twist. Turns out Karen had also been running a secret Facebook group under a fake name where she privately mocked residents, shared surveillance footage from people's doorbell cams without consent, and even plotted ways to discipline homes she considered unsightly. And yes, my house was on the list. So was the boy's uncle. So was Grace. We printed it. We brought it to court. You could have heard a pin drop when the judge flipped through the pages. "This isn't just malicious," she said. "It's organized cruelty." Karen's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. Our countersuit moved forward. We didn't ask for money. We asked for justice. The judge's gavel came down like thunder. Case dismissed. Countersuit approved. Karen didn't say a word as the verdict echoed through the courtroom. She just sat there perfectly still, almost too still, her lips drawn so tight they'd vanished into her face. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering something in her ear, but she didn't blink, didn't move. She looked like someone who just realized the house she built wasn't fireproof after all. Outside the courthouse, we didn't celebrate. There were no cheers, no champagne, just quiet nods, hands on shoulders, a few tears. Because when you've been under the thumb of someone like Karen for years, you don't feel joy when they fall, you feel relief. And maybe a bit of sadness. Sadness that it took this long. Sadness that so many of us stayed silent for so long. And a strange kind of mourning for the community we never got to be, thanks to one person's cruelty. But the work wasn't done. The very next week, the interim HOA board, now operating without Karen's interference, held a vote to formally dissolve the current operating procedures and start fresh. New rules, new elections, a new era. We renamed the trail Karen had illegally cemented, the Grace Path, in honor of the woman who quietly helped everyone, even when no one noticed. Volunteers showed up with jackhammers, wheelbarrows, even snacks. Someone brought music. The whole neighborhood came together, swinging sledgehammers and laying bricks side by side, like a suburban barn raising, but with 30 years of repressed HOA trauma mixed in. And right there, at the center of the new trailhead, we planted a replacement sage bush identical to the one Karen destroyed. Right next to it stood a small carved plaque made from reclaimed cedar, planted in love, grown in resistance. For Leah, that was my wife's name. A few neighbors teared up. So did I. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came that afternoon, when a teenage girl walked up to me, holding something behind her back. "Mr. Bennett?" she asked, voice trembling. I think this belongs to you." She handed me a plastic pot. Inside was the original bush, shriveled, wilted, but not dead. "I found it in the community dumpster the day Karen tore it out," she said. "I didn't know who it belonged to until I saw your name on the news. I tried to keep it alive." My throat caught. I didn't even know her name. "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means." She smiled. "I think I do. We replanted that, too. gave it its own spot under the old oak tree, near the bench where Grace sits every morning with her coffee and crossword. We called it the Survivor. But Karen, her story wasn't done unraveling. Because of her abuse of HOA funds, she was now under investigation by the state's Department of Consumer Protection. Then came word that her nephew, the one who'd received thousands in fake construction payouts, had turned state's evidence. He gave up bank records, emails, even text messages where Karen bragged about bleeding the HOA dry before I pass it to someone dumber. Then the press got involved again. This time it wasn't just local. A regional network picked up the story. The headline blazed across morning news like wildfire. Ex-HOA president faces charges in fraud scandal, Memorial Bush case, sparks national outrage. Karen went viral for all the wrong reasons. Clips of her tantrum at the meeting, screenshots from the surveillance footage, even a side-by-side comparison of her before and after mugshot, since she was now facing multiple misdemeanor charges for trespassing, destruction of property, and misuse of public funds. But the final nail? An exposé in The Atlantic titled, "The Tyranny of the Clipboard: How One Woman's Obsession with Control Crushed a Community Until It Fought Back." Our neighborhood became the case study. I was interviewed for that one too, but I asked them not to use my face. "I'm not the hero here," I said. "The community is." And maybe that's what made it all feel worth it. Because a month later, something wild happened. The same HOA that used to weaponize ordinances now used its funds to install wheelchair ramps at the trail, plant drought-friendly gardens for elderly residents, and create a scholarship for local teens interested in environmental science named after my wife, the Leah Bennett Memorial Fund. Karen lost her job, her reputation, her board seat, her legal standing. But worse than all that, she lost her power, and people started seeing her for who she really was: not a protector of rules, but a woman who cloaked her fear of change in fake concern for community standards. I don't hate her, truly, but I'll never forgive her either. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. The bush she tore out is still here, alive, blooming. But Karen is gone. What do you think when someone crosses the line between order and oppression? Can they ever come back? Or are there some things that deserve to be left in the past? Let me know below. Spring came early that year. Maybe it was just the way time feels when people are finally breathing again, like the days stretch a little longer, and the sunlight feels earned instead of borrowed. The trail, once known as Karen's Cement Strip, was now a vibrant artery through the neighborhood. Kids rode their bikes on it after school. Veterans took morning walks without fear of being fined for unauthorized flags. Families picnicked under newly planted trees. Someone even painted a mural on the old maintenance shed, a mosaic of wildflowers spelling the words, "We stand together." The air felt different. So did the people. I noticed it most in the little things. The way folks made eye contact again. How they waved when they passed each other. Laughed on front porches. Checked in on the elderly without being asked. The fear that had hung over Oak Hills like low storm clouds for years was gone. But one moment sealed it for me. It was a Saturday. I was sitting on the bench near Leah's bush, just watching the petals tremble in the breeze. That's when Grace joined me, coffee in hand, tablet under her arm as always. She didn't speak at first, just sipped and smiled. After a while, she said, "You know, I think you saved this place." I shook my head. "I just said no to a clipboard." Grace chuckled. "You did more than that. You reminded people what no looks like when it's rooted in grief, not defiance. That matters." We sat a while longer. Then she told me something I didn't expect. "Karen's house is up for sale." I blinked. "What?" "She packed up last week. Movers came early. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just gone." "Where'd she go?" Grace shrugged. "Nobody really knows. Word is her husband filed for separation. Her nephew's testifying in the state case. She's not welcome at any of the other HOAs in town. They've blacklisted her after the press." I didn't say anything. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, to picture her driving away with her car full of regrets and fake rules. But all I felt was quiet. A strange, necessary kind of quiet. People like her, Grace continued, they think power is something you hold in your hands. But real power, she pointed toward the trail. It's when people follow you because they believe in you, not because they're afraid of you. I nodded slowly. And when they stop being afraid, she loses everything. A few weeks later, we held a memorial planting day. Not for anyone in particular, but for what was lost. Families donated seeds. Kids painted tiny wooden signs. Neighbors wrote poems and taped them to the fence. At the center of it all, we planted a grove of flowering sage. Not just one bush, a whole grove. Dozens of purple blooms, stretching across the slope like a quiet revolution. And then came the sign hand-carved, oak-stained, mounted right in the middle of the grove. In memory of what we withstood, in celebration of what we became. Oak Hill's community. I don't think Karen will ever come back. But if she does, she won't recognize the place. Because Oak Hills isn't hers anymore. It never really was. It belongs to the people who refused to be silenced. Who stood up, even when it was uncomfortable. Who believed that rules should serve people, not the other way around. It belongs to Grace and Paul, and that teenage girl who saved my wife's bush. It belongs to the boy whose uncle can walk again. It belongs to Leah, her roots now deeper than ever. And maybe, just maybe, it belongs to me too. Because I came here looking for peace. I found something better. I found community.